Okay, it's raining today, so I decided I would tackle putting this Bellm number 3 spring kit in this Encore Endeavor frame. And you can see that the spring kit comes with a hammer spring, a trigger spring, a firing pin return spring, a locking lug spring, and a trigger guard return spring. You'll also notice that look at the barrel locking spring. You can see the Bellm is shorter, but also it's a lot stouter and makes your lockup a lot better on your frame. You can compare the hammer spring to a stock one, and they're approximately the same length, but I hope the video shows it. The Bellm spring on the right is a lot heavier spring, and the same goes true with the firing pin return spring, which is that little devil right there. Alright, we're going to put this firing pin return spring in this Encore Pro Hunter Endeavor frame, but the first thing we need to do is to cock the hammer so that we can access that Allen bolt right there. And to do that, reach your finger inside the frame and push in the interlock, and you can cock the hammer with the barrel off. Take your Allen wrench, unscrew the screw, take it out, push on the firing pin, and out comes the firing pin bushing, the firing pin, and the spring. And you notice the crud on the back of that firing pin block. This is something that should be done ever so often, is cleaning those things, because I've seen several muzzleloaders, especially with muzzleloader barrels on them, rust behind this firing pin block. And if you hadn't ever cleaned yours, it'd probably be a good time to do it when you replace this spring. But it's pretty simple. Notice the orientation of the spring, and you can see how light that one is, and the Bellm spring is a lot heavier. See how it goes on? It goes in right there, and then you just simply line the bolt holes back up and insert it back in. If it wasn't all thumbs, it'd be easy. There we go. Line the hole back up for the screw, and tighten her back down. Some people always want to torque everything. I usually just tighten things on most gun parts until they're just real good and snug, but being careful not breaking it all. And there we go. There's the upgrade to the heavy duty firing pin return spring. And remember, put your finger right there, push in, and cock the hammer back. Alright, it's time to put this 44-pound Bellm hammer spring in this frame. And I've already used my Wheeler trigger pull gauge and got the pull weight on this frame, and it's about 3 pounds, which is real good for an Encore or Pro Hunter or Endeavor from the factory. Most aren't near that good, but typically when you install one of these, somewhat you can just this spring alone, you can expect about a ½ pound drop in pull weight. The easiest way I have found to change this spring, as opposed to just stripping the entire frame, is to remove this this nut on the end of the frame. And to do that, you can just take your ½ inch wrench, lay it on something solid, get a firm grip, because usually it's hard, and this one was already loose. I'd already loosened it, but you can just take it off. And most people don't even know that was a nut, but it is a nut. And if you'll notice in there, you will see a strut, and you can turn it upside down and it drops out with that hammer spring on it. And again, you can tell a difference between the factory and the Bellm. And of course the Bellm just slides right back on there. One thing you can notice when you have this off, some people have complained about they couldn't cock their Encore back. Well, the reason that is if you put too long of a, when you cock an Encore, the strut actually protrudes down through that bushing, and your stock bolt goes in right there. And if you run that stock bolt in too far, it will interfere with that strut and your hammer won't cock. And usually that can be fixed by just putting some more washers here on the end of that bolt. Make sure I got the good heavy spring here, and we're going to put it in. You simply slide it onto the strut, drop it in like this. Don't drop it in with it turned like that. Drop it in with it turned like this. And see how it just dropped in? It's seated down in there like it should be. And you just re-screw the nut back on. And of course, tighten it up real well. Alright, so now again, you showed you before on how to cock your Encore. Push in the interlock, cock it back, and we will get us a new trigger pull on it and see if it truly did lower the trigger pull. I didn't like that one. Let's try it again. It hit my hand. And you can see we did lower the trigger pull. It went from 3 pounds to just a little over 2.5 pounds. Alright, let's tear down this frame and put this Bellm trigger spring in it. First, let's remove the trigger guard, just a screwdriver. Just unscrew the screw. I don't know what that was. Unscrew the screw, drop the screwdriver. Sometimes those don't want to pull out, so I'll take my pliers, pull on it, lay it down there, and there, right there is the trigger guard return spring. You see it sits there on that strut. There's the inside of an Encore frame. Next step is just take the trigger out, but you need a punch. And you push that pin out right there that is holding the trigger in. Pin comes out, bring it down, pull that out. There is your Encore trigger. And there sits the trigger spring. And that is probably the hardest piece to put in. But you can just take a punch, slide through, whoop, push that out too far. Slide through, leave your pin there catching that side, leave your punch here catching the interlock and the sear on that side. Retract it a little bit, reach in there with a pair of pliers. Out comes trigger spring. We're ready to install the new spring. If I can get my hands on it. Like I already said, this is the hardest part to put in, but it's just a little bit of fiddling they usually go. I usually try to grab it with a pair of pliers, insert it back in best I can, and try to catch it. Then you have to line your pin back up. And these are the hardest ones to put in. Occasionally you can take and just tap on the end of that, and now your new spring is in. Take your trigger. See that notch in it right there? That's where the spring goes. catch it in your spring. Find your pin. Insert it. Get everything lined back up. Push it in. Alright, now we're going to test this frame to make sure we have done everything right. And notice I don't even have the trigger guard back on it yet, but you can still cock it. Push the interlock back in. You want to cock it. Hold your hand on the hammer. Let it go all the way down. This is important. You see I still have my hand on the trigger. You want to make sure the hammer rebounds when you let off. See how it rebounded? If that hammer did not rebound, then you have issues with the frame. They're supposed to rebound. I'm going to test it again. See how it rebounded? Perfect. Alright. So, just out of curiosity, let's see what our trigger pull is now. Alright, let's pull it. There's a trigger pull. About 1.5 pounds. Pretty cool for a drop-in spring kit. Usually I don't get that light on an Encore. When I do these, typically you get about 2.5 pounds. But this Endeavor frame is just, they must have done a better job polishing the sears in the frame when it was built in the factory. Alright, we're just about done. There's our return spring for our trigger guard. There's our trigger guard. You'll notice that strut there has to go through that hole on the trigger guard. And you just got to line all this back up and push down on it to get rid of that spring pressure, which sometimes I have little issues with these too, because that spring is a heavier spring. And there we go. Got to get the trigger in there. There we go. Then you have to put the screw back in right there and get all that lined back up. But when you put that screw in, you'll notice inside that frame you have that spring-loaded button on the trigger. So to get that in, oh, got something with a magnet. Get that in, you need to take something and push that down. Then you can push that the rest of the way in. And then tighten it up. You gotta be careful with that. I've seen them try to cross thread before. Good and tight. Test it for function one more time. Works just like it's supposed to. And that's the installation of this right here, one of those Bellm Deluxe Spring Kit number 3s.